and this is my fourth video about preaching, this one on execution or delivery of sermons, and about, how I do it is what it is. And, I have planned the sermons way in advance. I've researched, sometimes taught, outlined, written, edited, practiced the sermon. I'm ready to deliver it and enjoy doing that as well. But first, while I'm driving to the church, I will keep hammering in my head, reviewing in my mind the structure, the key points, outlines, something like that, so that I'm just absolutely focused on my message of the day. Of course, I often have a variety of other things to do when I get there: teach a class, attend a meeting, do whatever before worship. But I'll always try to keep that structure, that plan in my mind. At the time of the service, I notice I'm just completely focused on communicating with people, and feel really no concerns, no anxieties, I just really believe I've got a message and I'm going to bring it to them. In doing that, I use almost every delivery method ever dreamed about or imagined. I suppose I have used it one time or another. I'm not going to go through them all, but just a couple that I depend on a lot. At large churches, I usually stay in the pulpit. Not always, but I usually stay in the pulpit. And I usually have my full text in front of me, even though sometimes I'm done and I realize I never looked at it, or I might look at it several times, depending on what I'm trying to communicate and how. But even in large churches, I have walked around in the front, up on the kind of platform area. I've even gone out, especially when there's a special group to be addressed for something special, and walk out onto the floor of the church, even in very large churches that I have served in. But mostly, I'm a pulpit preacher in a large traditional church. In smaller churches, like where I'm serving now, I usually don't do that. It just seems too formal. And so I tend to be walking around in the front of the front pew, down the middle aisle, and I use the description of talking the sermon. I have colleagues who memorize their sermons word for word. I've worked with them when they've been preaching 3 services in a day at a large church, and it comes out exactly the same each time. Mine never does. It will always be different because I don't completely memorize it. I just have it inside me. I just know it in that way. But even at the small church I'm at now, on special Sundays, Easter, Pentecost, Christmas, and maybe 3 or 4 others, I stay in the pulpit to give it its more, just kind of say, this is an important day in the life of the church. And the pulpit seems, for me, conveys that. So I'll use a mix. Now, occasionally, well, I should say in modern churches, with screens and whatnot, I've always used things like PowerPoints. They're getting tiresome. Sometimes I just put my own collection of things together. I'll use pictures, text, videos, outlines, whatever will be helpful. And I have to say, in a church without that equipment, like I'm at now, sometimes I really miss that. I want to talk about how an artist has interpreted something. John the Baptist pointing to Jesus, and the elements of that would be one I remember using about a year ago. Well, without that picture, without the picture of the painting, I feel kind of weaker. So I miss those things sometimes. Sometimes I feel they're really distracting. And when you're in a modern church, you have to use them all the time. That gets pretty tiresome as well. But I've used all that. Occasionally, I use a congregational input style. I have done this sometimes with really fairly powerful success. I prepare an introduction, a conclusion, really make sure I totally know the passage and the theme, and then I solicit questions or comments from the congregation. and I respond to them. I key off of them, always driving back to the theme. Now, I've done this in large congregations where there are a lot of youth and young adults with texting their questions in. None of the questions can come ahead. They all got to come on the spot. I've usually had an associate or assistant pastor who receives the text and, filter out any that might be inappropriate, and then he just reads them to me. And for the kind of basic part of the sermon, I'm using what they ask and what they comment in order to compose the sermon on the spot and bring it to the theme and lead to my conclusion. And when you have the confidence in the passage, in your own sort of abilities of dealing with it, boy, it reaches a lot of young people to use that kind of technique. I'm at a place that doesn't have a lot of young people. It's still occasionally I solicit comment from the congregation. I'll ask a question or two, they'll respond, and I key off of it. And so you've got to be kind of genuinely flexible and open to be able to use what they have and bring it into your theme and wind up into your conclusion where you're going. Sometimes I talk to specific elements in the congregation. I'll say, now I'm going to talk to the youth, and I'll be looking straight at, they tend to sit together if they're not with their family, and be talking directly to them and make sure they know I've got a special part of this sermon that is addressing them, or to children. What's interesting is when I do that, I notice everybody else is listening even sharper at the time. So while you're giving an authentic message, say to the youth, it draws in everybody else. Sometimes I'll, address a specific person for a sentence or two, and that works in the same way. Well, I guess that's about what I wanted to say about delivery, except this: evaluate. I try to have occasional evaluations. When I was at a large church, it would be the agenda of the clergy meeting every week to take some time to talk about the sermon, to try and get some honest feedback. I would notice sometimes when they're giving it to me, the assistants or associates would be not a lot sharper than the members of the congregation. I don't know whether they're intimidated or what. But I try to get honest feedback. If there are clergy who worship in the congregation, often you get really good feedback from them. Sometimes from friends when they're visiting. I'll ask, how did this go? And try to get answers. And I occasionally will review if there's an audio or video recording of my sermons. And it's always embarrassing, and it can be very helpful in the long run as well. Then about 2 hours after worship on Sunday, the adrenaline and coffee rush is gone. I always need a nap, and I just always have. And then I refocus Monday morning, file the sermon, record it in my database, and on Tuesday start over in the endeavor to proclaim the word in a creative way for the congregation that I serve. Wish you well in the same endeavor. As you move and gain more experience, you'll find your voice in preaching. For me, it never really happened till I was preaching every single Sunday, and suddenly I knew this is it, and I've got it. And I think the congregations have felt it ever since. They will from you if you do good planning, if you check others so you're not just working out of your own prejudices, if you prepare well and work to execute with a little creativity.